Lieutenant Orion stood in the lower deck of the transport craft, quietly steadying his breath as the engines roared in the distance, the craft's metal hull trembling beneath his boots. He had trained for countless missions across the galactic rim, yet none had involved slipping into a high-security prison during a riot, armed with a clandestine directive to extract, or if necessary, eliminate a singular alien captive. The name Rilla glimmered in his mind, a rumor among the Auroran circles, a coded reference in council transmissions, a faint echo that spelled either fortune or disaster. As the pilot signaled touchdown on Titan's gate, Orion recalled the briefing: an impenetrable fortress orbiting a dying moon, known for hosting the sector's most lethal criminals and political dissidents. He lifted a gloved hand to check the infiltration device strapped to his forearm, ensuring that every tiny sensor was in place. His orders were crisp: delve into the chaos, locate Rilla, and spirit her away before the prison's emergent lockdown sealed every corridor. If the captive proved hostile beyond reason, he was to use lethal force. Yet a murmur of doubt flickered at the back of his consciousness, gnawing at the edges of his discipline. He knew that behind every assignment with such high secrecy lay a hidden truth. In the recesses of his heart, Orion suspected this was no ordinary capture, nor was the target merely another prisoner. He descended into the umbilical corridor that led from the cramped transport to the grated entrance of Titan's gate, letting the flickering red lights illuminate the narrow passage. Smoke from distant fires clouded the air, and the distant clamor of shouting inmates reverberated through the metallic corridors. Automated turrets hissed overhead, scanning for movement, while heavy blast doors sealed off entire wings of the prison complex. With an almost unnatural calm, Orion engaged his helmet's visor, cycling through infrared and motion detecting modes until he locked onto a corridor empty of patrolling mechs. He had memorized the schematics, stored them meticulously in his neural implants, forging a mental map of winding corridors and labyrinthine sublevels. His first objective: gain access to the central security hub and deactivate a portion of the automated defenses, thereby allowing him a slim window to maneuver deeper. The mission required precision. Any misstep would mark him as an intruder in a fortress brimming with lethal deterrents. The clangor of sparking cables and the shrieks of prisoners in the throes of rebellion spurred him on, the swirling chaos a testament to the perfect cover for infiltration. Step by cautious step, Orion traversed the first hall, hugging the walls as a squad of panicked guards sprinted past, oblivious to the infiltration because their sensors were down and their formations were broken by the riot. A single glance at their frantic faces was enough to confirm the severity of the prison meltdown. He pressed himself to a rusted panel, took a measured breath, and slid a security chip into the console. Sparks crackled, the chip verifying an illicit code purchased from a black market broker on Rivara. The console screen blinked green, partial override granted. Orion tapped the screen with 2 quick movements of his gloved fingertips, dimming the corridor lights and redirecting turret patrols to a lower level. An echoing siren wailed, and the overhead lights switched to an amber hue. Orion exhaled a breath of relief, a sliver of success in a place designed to quell any hope. He advanced forward, scaling a set of narrow steps that circled around a thick, transparent barrier. In the gloom beyond, riot squads clashed with convicts, plasma arcs lighting up the darkness, shadows dancing along the steel walls. Far below, he glimpsed the thrashing tide of prisoners swarming the guard stations, seizing weapons, blasting open cell doors in a wave of insurrection. His infiltration window was short. He could not be caught in the open if the central lockdown sequence activated. He recalled the priority: find Rilla's cell in the isolation wing. An indrawn breath steeled his resolve. Each stride carried him toward a labyrinth of bolts, biometric scanners, and electrified gates. Swiftly, Orion ducked behind an idle maintenance drone, hands deftly working on the control pad to deactivate the barrier for sublevel 9. A hiss of compressed air enveloped him as the pressure door slid open. In the flickering gloom of scattered lighting, he walked carefully into the hush of corridors, less touched by the ongoing pandemonium. The corridor leading to Rilla's location was alarmingly still, absent the raucous commotion that ravaged the main prison blocks. The hush was a sign of deeper threat. Titan's Gate had its share of monstrous criminals and political detainees, but few commanded such secrecy. Why would the council fear Rilla so fervently that they would instruct Orion to kill her if rescue failed? He felt a subtle tension in his shoulders, a silent warning that he was stepping into a moral quagmire. Then, a series of coded beeps emanated from his forearm device proximity alerts for the isolation cells. The door to sublevel 9 parted with a pneumatic sigh, revealing a row of locked cells, each behind a shimmering energy field tinted an eerie violet. Orion's visor scanned the occupant readouts, searching for the coded numeric string that matched Rilla's cell. Halfway down the corridor, he found the readout labeled #417, an anomaly listing minimal vital signals and blank personal data. As though it had been meticulously scrubbed, he approached the entry panel, inserted the forged passkey, and braced himself. An ominous click, a stuttering hum, and the energy field dissipated. Within the dim recess, Orion discerned a slender shape curled on the metal cot, luminous eyes half-lidded, glinting faintly against the gloom. The figure stirred, pivoting to face him. He froze, momentarily captivated by her presence. Greenish skin, with subtle metallic undertones, shimmered under the pale overhead glow, and her eyes, an uncanny shade of gold, examined him with an intensity that belied her posture. A strangled hush hung between them, until Orion raised his sidearm, a silent command for cooperation. The woman slowly stood, her movements akin to a cat's stealth. Not entirely human, but graceful. "You're not a guard," she said, her voice a liquid hush, melodic yet tinged with suspicion. Orion nodded, scanning the environment for hidden threats. "I'm here to take you out," he muttered, keeping his tone low. "Your name is Rilla, correct?" She inclined her head, a slight tilt that suggested both curiosity and measured trust. "I am," she answered. "The riot in the upper levels is our chance, I presume." When Orion lowered the sidearm, Rilla stepped forward, and the overhead beam illuminated faint lines of exhaustion on her features. She wore a tattered prison uniform, flecks of dried residue from medical tests hinting at repeated, invasive procedures. Orion recalled the data that Rilla was an alien of uncertain origin, rumored to be politically dangerous. If she was as lethal as rumored, this was the instant she might strike him down. Instead, she simply rested a hand on the doorframe, as though testing the boundary of her captivity. He signaled for her to follow, and the two strode into the corridor, anxious that a security detail might still lurk. Orion switched his visor to motion tracking mode. The corridor was clear, but time was short. He explained quietly that the prison was in meltdown, that they needed to reach a transport corridor if they wished to exit Titan's Gate undetected. Rilla nodded, though her gaze held a reflective depth. "Why risk yourself for me?" she asked, slipping behind him as he led the way. Orion frowned, uncertain how to respond with candor. He murmured something about orders, glancing away. Rilla's lips curled into a slight frown, her golden eyes flickering with unspoken questions. They advanced through neglected maintenance passages, unlit corridors strewn with debris, stepping over broken servo limbs from battered security drones. Now and then, they heard frenzied shouting overhead, the shrill ring of alarm klaxons. But in these deeper corridors, a cloak of silence reigned. Orion paused at a sealed hatch that led to an engineering crawl space. The code sequence flickered on his forearm display, and he input a fresh override. The hatch slid open with a metallic groan. Rilla's breath caught, her composure momentarily shifting to apprehension. She pressed her palm flat against the inner walls, as if wary of an unseen threat. Orion recognized that she had likely been subjected to isolation for a lengthy stretch, starved of real freedom. Guilt gnawed at him, yet his mission demanded efficiency. They pressed on, inching along the cramped tunnel. At the next junction, Orion detected faint footsteps approaching. He motioned for Rilla to stay low, raising a hand to hush her. Two guards wearing riot gear emerged around the corner, scanning the half-lit corridor for stragglers. Orion caught Rilla's tense posture, as though she might lash out in a frenzied attempt to break free. Instead, he tapped a command on his device, flooding the corridor's overhead lights with a timed flicker that disoriented the guards. In the strobing confusion, Orion moved with lethal grace, disabling them before either could raise an alarm. Rilla observed in silent astonishment as he used non-lethal holds and stun charges. Then, a distant explosion rattled the deck. The riot was intensifying, which meant heavier lockdown measures. They needed to move faster. They forced open a series of bulkheads, slipping between levels that showed ominous signs of structural damage. Sparks rained from severed cables, the acrid sting of chemicals wafting through the ventilation system. Orion led them to an abandoned guard station, rummaging through scorched compartments to find anything that might assist map updates. Clearance codes. Medikits. A flicker of recognition crossed Rilla's face as she spotted a battered data card. She stooped, retrieving it with delicate fingers. "This has coordinates," she murmured, scanning the flimsy label. "It's referencing Auroran symbols." Orion blinked. He had gleaned from mission briefings that Rilla's species was Auroran, rumored to be reclusive interstellar aristocrats. Why would a prison outpost hold data on Auroran flight paths? He tucked the data card away. "We'll examine that later," he said, stepping back to the corridor. "Once we're off this station." She nodded but cast him a piercing glance. "If your directive was only to free me, why does it matter whether I can read these coordinates?" Orion paused, torn between honesty and his mission's secrecy. "Let's say there are many who want you dead," he finally offered. "But I was told you might hold some financial or political leverage." She raised a brow, suspicion etched onto her face. "Money," she said, her tone edged with quiet scorn. "Power. Typical reasons to turn me into a commodity." Orion said nothing, focusing on bypassing the security door, though he felt a pang at the raw bitterness in her words. Their progress led them into the heart of Titan's Gate's engineering ward, a cavernous expanse of twisting pipes, pulsing reactors, and automated maintenance arms. The riot in other sectors gave them partial cover, but the prison's meltdown might incinerate them if they lingered. Orion took in the labyrinth of metal catwalks and scalding steam vents with a grimace. Over the thunder of churning machinery, he shouted for Rilla to remain close. She nodded, matching his pace, evidently more agile and resilient than her slender frame suggested. At one point, they clung to the side of a railing, flattening themselves against the steam-scorched barrier as a roving squad of mechs stomped by. The mechanical monstrosities scanned the environment, their sensor arrays glowing a dull red. Orion felt Rilla's trembling breath behind him, the tension radiating through her, perhaps recalling the horrors of captivity. A single slip would mean detection, and in these depths, every second counted. Once the mechs thundered away, Orion signaled the all-clear, and they ascended a flight of graded steps to an upper platform. From that vantage, the chaotic swirl of flames and debris below framed the station's precarious condition. With each passing minute, the structural integrity waned. A corridor on the far side led to an auxiliary hangar, typically reserved for supply shuttles or staff transport. If they could commandeer a small craft, they might outrun the station's approach to full lockdown. Yet, as they neared the sealed blast door that guarded the hangar, Orion's device beeped with red urgency unbeknownst to him. An override had engaged from the command center, requiring high-level credentials. He cursed under his breath. The passkeys he'd acquired were insufficient. Then, Rilla stepped forward. A ghost of a smile flickered across her lips. "Let me try," she offered, pressing her hand to the scanner. For a moment, Orion watched in silent amazement as the scanner beeped, scanning Rilla's biometrics. He was prepared for it to reject her, yet a green light flashed, and the door gave a metallic groan before sliding open. She withdrew her hand, meeting Orion's astonished gaze with a measured calm. "There are things you don't know," she said softly, "like who I really am." His mind reeled. The passkey recognized her authority, an authority beyond that of standard prisoners or staff. He gestured for them to proceed inside, filing that revelation away for a moment. When survival wasn't the immediate priority, they slipped into the hangar, weaving between docking clamps and flight-ready pods. A handful of scurrying mechanics fled at the sight of them, presumably not wanting to get entangled in the riot or with armed intruders. Orion's pulse surged with relief as he spotted a sleek shuttle in the far corner, white hull marred by scorch marks. If he could power it up, they might manage an escape. But the area was wide open, and security drones hovered above the overhead rafters, scanning for any suspicious activity. Orion indicated to Rilla that they needed a diversion. She nodded, pointing out the cargo loader lifts on the other side of the hangar. If they overloaded that system, the meltdown of the secondary power couplings could create a chain reaction, enough to scramble the drone's sensors. They split up, Rilla moving with uncanny stealth behind the forklift scaffolding while Orion accessed the shuttle's external controls. He ripped open a panel, reconnecting stray wires. The craft's battered console flickered to life. A pressure seal hissed, beckoning them inside. Orion glimpsed Rilla sprinting across the deck as the cargo lifts erupted in sparks. The overhead drones convulsed midair, their scanning arrays flickering. He slammed the shuttle's side hatch open, waving Rilla inside. She rushed in, breathless, and Orion hammered the ignition sequence, ignoring caution protocols. The shuttle's engine roared, and they tore free of the docking clamps, scorching the hangar floor as they ascended in a swirl of dust and chaos. Titan's gate shrank below, an imposing silhouette riddled with fires, venting fumes into the black expanse of space. Rilla sank into the co-pilot seat, exhaling shakily. Orion navigated the craft away from the station's defensive turrets, which half-heartedly fired upon them. But the meltdown in progress apparently hampered the targeting systems. A fractal of shimmering starfield spread across the cockpit window, a sharp contrast to the infernal gloom they had just escaped. Once safely out of range, Orion let the autopilot maintain a stable course. He turned to Rilla, who was slumped in the seat, eyes half-closed in exhaustion. "You want to tell me how you opened that blast door?" he asked quietly. Her golden gaze lifted to his, resignation flickering across her expression. "I have a confession," she began, voice hushed. "But let's check that data card first." Orion obliged, inserting the battered data card into the shuttle's console. A swirl of Auroran script filled the small screen. The ancient symbols, which Orion could not read, soon yielded to a flow of star charts, route diagrams, and coded transmissions. Rilla studied them, her face growing increasingly grim. "This is confirmation of the Auroran Empire's involvement," she whispered. "Specifically, the infiltration by certain factions who orchestrated my capture." Orion's eyes narrowed. "So you're a political detainee," he said. "But the passkey recognized you are you, a member of their aristocracy." Rilla let out a shaky breath, as though wrestling with the enormity of her words. "I am Rilla Ovatus," she whispered, "heiress to the Auroran throne, though exiled and believed dead by many. Those who wanted me gone ensured I was labeled a dangerous element, seeking to rid themselves of my rightful claim." Orion listened, stunned. The council had said she might be valuable, but they had never disclosed the true extent of her status. Then, the weight of his kill or rescue directive struck him like a hammer blow, leaving him with the bitter realization that he had nearly murdered an heir to an empire. For the next span of hours, Rilla recounted a story of betrayal and conspiracy, describing how advisors within the Auroran court had grown corrupted, seeking to divert funds, exploit military might, and reshape alliances for personal profit. When Rilla uncovered traces of these misdeeds, they arranged her disappearance, forging documents that condemned her as a terrorist, ensuring she would languish unrecognized in Titan's Gate. They had likely bribed certain figures in the Galactic Council to ensure she was quietly disposed of. Orion, who had believed the Council's mission was pure, felt a surge of anger. He recalled the briefing officer's words, "If she resists, put her down, now." The entire operation was tainted by political intrigue. Yet Rilla's revelation did not end with her identity. She confessed that her fortune, rumored to be an unfathomable vault of resources, had been frozen by the corrupt advisors to keep her from challenging them. But there remained scattered evidence, stowed away in secret repositories, star charts, and coded transmissions, evidence that could unravel the conspirators' hold. If only she could return to her homeworld and present her case to loyal factions in the Empire. Listening to her, Orion realized that his mission and his conscience compelled him to aid her in securing justice. He had risked his life to break a stranger from a prison riot, but in doing so, he had stumbled into a galactic power struggle that reached far beyond Titan's Gate. As they drifted beyond the edge of the prison station's sensor range, Orion set the shuttle to silent running. He pulled up star charts, mentally calculating how they might navigate to Auroran space without crossing paths with Council interceptors. Rilla, still fatigued, joined him at the console, pointing to certain star systems along the trade routes. They debated the best approach. A direct route would be fastest, but also the most likely to see them intercepted. A more meandering path through remote sectors would buy them time, at the risk of encountering pirates or running dangerously low on supplies. Ultimately, they agreed to take a cunning route that capitalized on Rilla's knowledge of hidden Auroran outposts, once used by her mother's expeditionary fleets. Before they could initiate the first jump, an incoming message crackled on the comm array. Orion froze, exchanging a wary glance with Rilla. The readout displayed a familiar encryption signature, Galactic Council Override. "Lieutenant Orion," came a metallic voice. "Report status. We show you have departed Titan's Gate. Confirm mission success." Orion hesitated. The subtext was unmistakable. They wanted to know if he had neutralized or secured the target. He muted the comm, turned to Rilla, and saw in her eyes the same tension that coiled in his gut. He punched in a short-coded response. "Mission compromise. Target at large." He knew the Council would interpret that as a sign that he'd lost track of her. Perhaps it would buy them precious time. Rilla's features softened with relief, though her posture remained rigid as Orion jammed the signal to prevent further contact. They pivoted the shuttle away from the Titan's Gate sector, accelerating into slipspace near an uncharted planetoid. The jump cast them into swirling streaks of light as the starlit void distorted. Rilla gazed out the viewport, her thoughts clearly turned inward. Orion gently placed a hand on her shoulder, and she closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. "I never expected a human to do this for me," she admitted, voice tinged with weary gratitude. Orion swallowed, uncertain how to respond. "I was simply following orders," he said, though they both knew that was not the entire truth anymore. Upon emerging from slipspace, near a dim red star, they found themselves in a lonely quadrant dotted with planet fragments, remnants of a system that had collapsed eons ago. Orion guided the shuttle to a drifting metal spire, once an Auroran outpost dedicated to star mapping. The structure was battered, half derelict, yet still emitting faint energy signals. Rilla recognized it from ancient records. They docked with caution, venturing through vacuum-sealed corridors caked in cosmic dust. Within the flickering interior, they found operational databanks filled with incomplete star charts. Rilla spent hours cross-referencing them with the stolen data card, assembling a puzzle of routes, passcodes, and final destinations. Orion, meanwhile, scrounged for supplies in the outpost's storerooms, discovering oxygen canisters, a few rations that had somehow survived. In that isolated spire, Rilla mustered the resolve to piece together enough evidence to confront her empire's conspirators. She uncovered references to a labyrinthine vault hidden within her homeworld's third moon. The vault contained genealogical archives, financial ledgers, and data crystals that could prove her lineage beyond doubt. If she could reach it, no corrupt official could silence the truth. But her revelations came with the sobering fact that the conspirators had likely seized critical points of the Empire's bureaucracy, ensuring that returning openly would be dangerous. Rilla and Orion devised a plan. They would slip onto the moon covertly, forging alliances with any loyalists they could muster. Along the way, they would collect additional evidence to strengthen Rilla's claim and expose the corruption. Their path took them through harrowing encounters. They narrowly escaped a council patrol near the Tarim Nebula, forced to conceal themselves behind sensor-reflective asteroids. A savage band of pirates attempted to board their shuttle in the silent void near Kelsar's belt, but Orion's skillful piloting and Rilla's resourcefulness in rerouting the shuttle's power systems turned the tide. In every brush with danger, they realized how precarious their quest was. The conspirators were not idle, and the Council's willingness to align with them only spoke to the depth of infiltration. Each escape made the bond between Orion and Rilla stronger, though they rarely spoke of it openly. A sense of mutual reliance and shared ideals wove a tapestry of trust that neither had anticipated in the midst of infiltration and chaos. Over time, Rilla confided in Orion about her younger years, describing the grand halls of the Imperial Palace, the mosaic floors that told the tales of Auroran ancestry, the feeling of unity she once felt among her people. She recalled her late mother, Empress Soliri, whose compassion for outsiders and desire for fair governance had threatened older factions bent on maintaining archaic hierarchies. It was that compassion that Rilla inherited, fueling her refusal to remain silent in the face of corruption. When she spoke of this legacy, her posture straightened, her golden eyes gleaming with conviction. Orion, listening in quiet admiration, found himself recalling his own childhood on the outskirts of a barren colony, where all he yearned for was a sense of belonging. In Rilla's unwavering dedication to her empire's well-being, he saw the kind of integrity that transcended species and rank. They reached the outskirts of Auroran space under the cover of an unregistered merchant convoy, switching the shuttle's transponder to an outdated Auroran code found in the old outpost. They managed to slip by cursory scans. In the distance, Rilla's homeworld glowed like a blue gem, ringed by shimmering cosmic dust. Orbiting the planet, the imposing shape of the third moon loomed. Orion's instruments picked up dense orbital defenses, an array that Rilla recognized as both an ancient artifact of the Empire's proud military tradition and a newly upgraded network, likely installed by those who had usurped her place. "We need stealth," Orion murmured, eyeing the display that highlighted numerous patrol ships. Rilla nodded, her expression somber. "My best chance is to access an old infiltration route beneath the eastern crater. If we can land there, we'll be close to the vault." They slipped past the defense perimeter with heart-pounding anxiety, aided by a confluence of factors' outdated logs that still listed Rilla's old security codes, cosmic interference that masked their small craft, and the conspirators' probable overconfidence in her presumed captivity. Touching down on the moon's rocky surface, they found themselves before a towering basalt cliff pockmarked with tunnels. Rilla led the way, recalling fragments of a map from her mother's records. They ventured through winding channels, occasionally descending through hidden shafts that had once been used by Auroran elites for covert expansions. More than once, Orion had to use his cutting torch to clear obstructions, while Rilla hacked ancient control consoles to restore partial power. The moon's core was riddled with labyrinthine corridors, dimly lit by flickering crystals that still glowed after centuries. At last, they emerged into a cavern that hummed with faint energy. At its center stood a tall set of ornate doors, etched with the swirling patterns of the Auroran crest. A symbolic depiction of the Empire's founding soared across the metal surface, showing starships and robed figures. This, Rilla confirmed, was the entrance to the vault that safeguarded official records. She took a trembling breath, pressing her palm to a genealogical seal. A resonant chime signaled, echoing across the dark chamber. Slowly, the doors parted, revealing a corridor lined with luminous tiles that flared to life at her presence. Within lay a trove of knowledge rows of data crystals, ancient scrolls, locked compartments containing centuries of Imperial records. Rilla and Orion set to work, guided by the flickering green lights that indicated archived genealogical proofs. In one sealed chamber, Rilla uncovered the crucial evidence, an unbroken lineage register that identified her as Rilla Ovatis, rightful heir to the Auroran throne, cross-referenced with biometrics that not even the conspirators could falsify. Another hidden chamber yielded financial ledgers and documents linking key advisors to nefarious bribes, the same advisors who orchestrated Rilla's downfall. The magnitude of the conspiracy was breathtaking, implicating distant outposts, council officials, and wealthy patrons. Just as they secured the evidence, an alarm reverberated through the vault. Orion's eyes shot to the corridor, expecting the worst. A detachment of Auroran soldiers stormed in, weapons leveled, commanding them to surrender. The conspirators had evidently detected the vault's reactivation. Rilla stepped forward, holding the genealogical registry. Her posture was regal, unwavering, as though she had shed the persona of a hunted fugitive. "Stand down," she commanded, voice firm. "I am your rightful heir, and I have the proofs." The soldiers, momentarily startled, hesitated. Their well-drilled discipline warred with the shocking sight of an heir, believed long dead. A commanding officer advanced, scanning Rilla's features, then glancing at the displayed evidence. Before the guard could respond, another group swept in, led by a haughty, gold-garbed official with glinting eyes. Orion's instincts flared. This had to be one of the conspirators. The official spat furious words, calling Rilla an imposter, ordering the soldiers to shoot them both. Chaos erupted in the hallowed vault. Orion defended Rilla with quick, precise shots, while she ducked behind a crystalline pillar, hugging the genealogical register protectively. The official barked commands, claiming authority from the Regent Council. Yet the moment Rilla managed to project the holographic genealogical proof, the guards wavered, uncertain of whom to obey. A tense standoff ensued, until a senior soldier recognized the veracity of the ancient seal embedded in the data. Sensing the tide turning, the conspirator official drew a concealed weapon, aiming at Rilla with lethal intent. But Orion lunged, intercepting the shot, groaning as the searing plasma grazed his armor. In one fluid move, Rilla flung a disarming throw with a baton she had retrieved from a fallen guard, knocking the official's weapon away. The official was seized by loyalist soldiers, howling accusations of a forgery that now rang hollow among the shimmering truth displayed by Rilla's registry. Once the dust settled, Rilla emerged from behind the shattered pillar, hair askew, golden eyes reflecting a potent blend of relief and sorrow. She knelt by Orion, who was clutching his wounded side, but still conscious. "You saved me, again," she said softly. He grimaced, assuring her it was only a flesh wound. The loyalist soldiers formed a respectful ring around them, some lowering their heads in recognition of her station. One soldier approached, saluting. "Orders." "Your Highness," he asked, voice trembling with awe. Rilla rose, her stance poised, memories of her mother's teachings coursing through her. She glanced at Orion, who nodded. "Arrest any conspirators," Rilla commanded, "and detain those suspected of treason. Secure the Empire's archives. I will address the populace and the High Council shortly." The soldiers saluted, quickly rounding up the official's men. Those scattered skirmishes surely remained across the Empire. With Orion's help, Rilla broadcast a message from the vault's central console, routing it to every Auroran channel. She displayed the genealogical proof, described her abduction, and revealed the unscrupulous deals that had corroded the Empire's leadership. She called for calm, unity, and an immediate cessation of conspiratorial intimidation. The effect was profound. Across Auroran territories, loyal generals and governors recognized her voice and the ancient seals. A wave of shock and vindication rippled through countless beings who had long suspected corruption at the Empire's core. Over the following days, a battered Orion witnessed Rilla ascend to her rightful station, stepping into the looming halls of the Imperial Palace on the Auroran homeworld. Flanked by newly sworn loyalist guards, she strode across mosaic floors that illustrated centuries of her people's history. In the throne room, she confronted the last remaining pockets of resistance officials who had clung to power under false pretenses. Security teams soon escorted them away in chains, and Rilla declared that the Empire would undergo sweeping reforms to prevent such betrayal from ever flourishing again. Where once her name had been a taboo, whispered in dark corners, it now resonated with hope. During a formal ceremony that recognized the restoration of her house, Rilla donned the imperial circlet, a modest band of sculpted metal that glowed with embedded starstones. Her gaze swept across the assembled dignitaries. At her side stood Orion, wearing a crisp uniform at her request, bearing the insignia of a newly formed liaison role between humankind and Aurorans. Murmurs of acceptance rippled through the court. Some had questioned placing a human so close to the throne. Yet Rilla insisted. Orion had risked all, defied crooked orders, and championed truth. The new empress wanted that kind of loyalty at the heart of her reign. In the quiet that followed the formalities, Rilla invited Orion to stand with her on a high balcony, the wind rustling the draperies at their backs. She gazed over a city that sprawled with shimmering spires and floating walkways, reflecting the brilliant tapestry of auroras that streaked the sky. "This is my home," she said quietly, "and for the first time, it feels safe again. You freed me from chains literal and metaphorical. I owe you a debt that words cannot express." Orion rested a hand lightly against the railing, still bandaged at the side. "I started this mission under false pretenses," he said, eyes fixed on the glowing horizon. "But it revealed a truth greater than I ever imagined. You taught me what it means to serve a cause worth believing in." She turned, searching his face, her voice hushed. "Will you stay? The Empire needs rebuilding, and I believe we can forge alliances that transcend old boundaries, if only you'll remain by my side." A faint smile curved Orion's lips. He recalled the countless missions, the reams of orders from the Council, the incessant struggle for pay and fleeting recognition. "I will stay," he replied, voice steady, "as long as my presence helps bring peace and justice." In response, Rilla's golden eyes glimmered with genuine warmth, a fragile hope blossoming between them that perhaps, amidst the swirl of cosmic politics, they could find a measure of personal solace. The next weeks were a whirlwind of reorganization. Loyalist leaders pledged fealty to Rilla, while those implicated in the conspiracy were removed from office and subjected to fair trials. The Empire's treasury, once hemorrhaged by unscrupulous insiders, was placed under new oversight. Orion, though not wholly comfortable with ceremonial duties, provided critical security advice, drawing on his experience to protect Rilla from any vengeful remnants of the old regime. Meanwhile, Rilla's fortune, long rumored but once unreachable, was restored to her in full, and she allocated large portions to revitalize impoverished colonies and invest in technologies that would empower the Empire's common people. Yet not all challenges were external. Rilla's reappearance sparked debates among the populace. Some revered her, hailing her as a just ruler who had overcome adversity, while others harbored skepticism or fear of radical changes. In hushed council sessions, Rilla wrestled with decisions that bore heavy weight on millions of lives, her sense of duty warring with her compassion. Orion, standing at her side, offered a grounded perspective. He reminded her that she had faced the worst terrors in Titan's Gate, endured betrayal by her own advisors, and yet emerged resolute. Slowly, she began to shape the Empire's policies around transparency, forging alliances with neighboring worlds, including human territories that had once been treated with aloof condescension. At last, on a day proclaimed by the Empire as the Day of Renewal, Rilla traveled with Orion to the ancient ceremonial grounds on the planet's southern continent. There, under the watchful gaze of the Empire's people, she consecrated a new pact, a vow of accountability, compassion, and shared destiny. She spoke of forging a future where no prisoner languished in hidden cells for daring to voice truth, and where the Empire's wealth served the many, not the powerful few. When she concluded her speech, the gathered crowds erupted in a roar of jubilation. The swirling auroras overhead shimmered like banners of hope across the sky. As the ceremonies wound down, Rilla found Orion amid the throng of cheering citizens, children weaving around them with wide, curious eyes. She clasped his hands, ignoring the protocol that insisted on more distance between an empress and her guard. Her voice was lost in the deafening applause, but he read her gratitude in her radiant smile. He recalled the moment he first glimpsed her hunched on that prison cot in Titan's Gate, and how far they both had come. The road ahead remained uncertain, for change seldom came without further trials. But they had reached a turning point crowned with victory. Their shared glances spoke of promise, of a bond tempered in adversity, destined to flourish in peace. In the quiet twilight that followed, as the crowds departed, Rilla and Orion slipped away from the formalities, finding a secluded garden behind the ancient stone amphitheater. The gentle hum of night insects drifted on the breeze, mingling with the distant revelry. Rilla looked at Orion, the starlight dancing in her golden eyes. He could sense the softness in her posture now that the day's weight had lifted. She whispered, "I once thought I had lost everything, my freedom, my people's trust, my own name. But you helped me reclaim it all." Orion's gaze fell on her hands, which trembled slightly. "I only did what felt right," he said, the memory of that fateful infiltration flooding back. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, each reflecting on the unlikely chain of events that had united them. Then, with a steadiness that belied the swirling emotion beneath, Rilla closed the distance between them, gently resting her head on Orion's shoulder. He wrapped his arms around her, the fleeting darkness of Titan's Gate, now no more than an echo, replaced by the tender hush of night blossoms and the soft glow of distant stars. If a new chapter was to begin in the Empire's story, it seemed fitting that they faced it together, bound by loyalty stronger than any political decree. In that quiet space, they allowed themselves to hope. The conspirators had been rooted out, the populace rallied behind their restored empress, and the seeds of renewal had been sown. Though challenges loomed, diplomatic overtures to the council, countless reforms within the Auroran realm, Rilla's unwavering spirit, and Orion's staunch integrity promised a future shaped by justice rather than deceit. Their hearts, battered yet unbroken, found in each other a peace once thought impossible. And so, beneath the silvered glow of an alien moon, the two who had met in the darkest corridors of captivity discovered that liberation was not merely an act of physical freedom, but a meeting of souls, forging a bond that neither the vastness of space nor the burdens of power could sunder. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. The Empire's newly minted reforms began to bear fruit, with improved conditions for border systems, renewed trade treaties with neighboring species, and an overhauled legal framework that guarded against treacherous officials. Life in the imperial court was not without friction, yet Rilla faced every challenge with a calm determination that inspired loyalty from her people. Orion's position evolved from clandestine protector to recognized confidant, and his presence at official events no longer raised eyebrows but was met with smiles of acceptance. Together, they orchestrated a delicate dance of negotiation, forging alliances far and wide, establishing links with human colonies that had once remained separate due to historical mistrust. Late one afternoon, Rilla accompanied Orion to a remote vantage point on her planet's northern hemisphere, where the setting sun ignited lakes into a tapestry of fire and gold. Standing there, the Empress shed her ceremonial regalia, letting her hair sway freely in the warm breeze. Orion, too, stepped out of his formal attire, relishing the quiet moment away from the swirl of obligations. They shared a simple meal by a rocky overlook, speaking in hushed tones about the roads that had led them here. Rilla admitted she still woke with memories of Titan's Gate, the suffocating cell, the fear that she might never see her home again. Orion confided that, despite completing mission after mission, it was the first time he felt he had truly made a difference. When the final sliver of sunlight dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in purples and reds, Rilla reached for Orion's hand, Her voice trembled slightly as she said, "Whatever trials come, we'll face them together, won't we?" Orion squeezed her hand. "The simplest answer carrying the greatest weight, always," he whispered. The same vow he had uttered when promising to defend her. The night air cooled, and the bright swirl of Auroran constellations emerged above them. The tapestry of stars seemed infinite, an endless promise. And so, their story reached a harmony that neither had dared believe in, forming a union of devotion and duty, boundless in its potential. The corruption that once plagued the Empire had been torn away, replaced by the first buds of a more honest era. The conspirators' network lay in ruin, with justice meted out fairly. Rilla, fully recognized as Empress Ovitis, no longer had to hide her identity or fear the shadows of betrayal. Orion, once a lone operative driven by ambiguous orders, found purpose and belonging in the heart of a civilization he had been sent to undermine. Across the star lanes, whispers spread an Auroran Empress and her human champion, forging a legacy that reshaped galaxies, built upon the simple premise that freedom cannot be chained indefinitely, that justice, once awakened, will not be silenced. Their final evening before a well-earned respite found them on the palace's highest terrace, dancing to a soft tune played by an ensemble of Auroran strings, notes drifting like autumn leaves in a gentle wind. Courtiers watched from afar, enthralled by the unity of their sovereign and her steadfast protector. In that dance, the cosmic swirl of calamities seemed distant, overshadowed by the radiant serenity of the moment. Rilla closed her eyes, letting the music and Orion's guiding steps carry her away, grounded in the knowledge that the empire she so loved was at last on a path of healing, and the man who had rescued her from darkness stood with her, not out of duty, but devotion. When the final note lingered in the air, a hush fell across the terrace. Rilla and Orion shared a private smile, an acknowledgement that their destinies had been entwined from the moment he stepped into her cell on Titan's gate. Together, they gazed at the shimmering sky, hearts brimming with gratitude for the trials that had brought them to this perfect instant. In that silent communion, they knew that though countless adventures might lie ahead, they would face each one side by side. Their story, born in chaos and sealed by trust, had at last found its happy ending, a promise of hope for them and for all who believed in the power of truth and love to conquer any darkness.